Hello, in this video, we're going to be talking about antifungal and antiviral compounds. So let's first start with antifungals. It is very, very hard to find drugs that target fungi. And the reason why is because they are very similar to humans biologically. If you look at the tree of life, fungi and animals are right next to each other. So in terms of, the physiology, they're very similar. And so it's hard to find something to target a fungi, but thankfully there are some small differences. So for example, fungi use ergosterol instead of cholesterol in their cell membrane. And so we have a few drugs, imidazole, triazole, and allylamines that inhibit ergosterol, and they usually inhibit the synthesis of ergosterol. So some of the more famous ones are clotrimazole, fluconazole, and terbinafine. And yeah, so they're going to be inhibiting ergosterol synthesis. We also have the polyenes. They're going to be binding to ergosterol, and instead of inhibiting it or kind of preventing the synthesis, they create a pore in the membrane by binding to the ergosterol. And the two most famous ones are going to be the nystatin and amphotericin B. So, yeah. All right, and then for the antivirals, we have a few options. So one of the more popular ones is called a nucleoside analog. So what a nucleoside analog is these are molecules that mimic the structure of a nucleotide. So they look like a nucleotide, but they aren't. And what happens is when a virus is in a cell trying to replicate itself, right? That's the whole point of a virus, is to go into a host cell and make more of itself. One of the main things it needs to do is make more of its own DNA. And so during DNA replication for the virus, it will accidentally incorporate the fake nucleotide, right? And it will incorporate that fake nucleotide, and that will stop DNA replication because it is not a real nucleotide. And so an example of this is acyclovir. Acyclovir looks very similar to the G nucleotide. So if you are infected with a virus and you take acyclovir, then it will, when the virus is making more of itself, it will accidentally incorporate the acyclovir instead of the G nucleotide into its DNA. And then that would stop DNA replication and hopefully, again, stop viral replication. So that's one of the more popular ones. There are also other antiviral drugs. These specifically are for HIV, but a lot of these drugs can be used in for other viruses as well. So one of them are going to be, one group are called diffusion inhibitors. These are drugs that prevent the virus from binding to the host cell. So if you remember, a virus has to bind to the host cell and then enter. And if we block the binding, then it can't enter. And so that kind of stops the the viral life cycle from the beginning. Then there are protease inhibitors. So depending on the virus, it may need protease enzymes, and these enzymes are very important for their life cycle. And these protease enzymes are very specific to that virus. And so we can design inhibitors for just specifically those proteases, and that would basically stop the the viral life cycle for that specific virus. And then we also have reverse transcriptase inhibitors as well as integrase inhibitors. And these are going to be for viruses that are retroviruses, meaning that their genetic material is RNA. They convert their RNA to DNA using reverse transcriptase, and then that DNA gets integrated into the host cell. So for example, HIV does this a lot. And so we have a few drugs that can inhibit both the reverse transcriptase enzyme that converts RNA back to DNA, and then the integrase enzyme that integrates the DNA into the humans, the host DNA. And so as you can see, there's a lot of different drugs that can be used to stop viruses from doing their thing inside of the host cell. As I mentioned, this diagram is showing specifically the anti-HIV drugs, but a lot of these drugs have been at least researched to see if they can be used against other viruses as well, since a lot of viruses have similarities. So for example, integrase inhibitors can be used for other viruses as well, the protease inhibitors, the fusion inhibitors, etc. So there's a lot of research going on. Anti-HIV drugs and just antivirals in general are relatively new. And so there's still a lot of research on how can they be used for different viruses, or when a virus evolves, how do we, change it up? So it's still a relatively new field in terms of, their purposes. So yeah, those are pretty much all of the options that we have so far. As you can see, there's not too many drugs to fight for both viruses and fungi. It is very difficult to find drugs for these types of infections. Hopefully this video was interesting, and I will see you in the next video.